Joining us today, we have Lorraine Schwamberg, who's the Assistant National Director for QPS Incident Management, and Lorraine leads out on the Incident Management arm of the National Quality and Patient Safety Directorate within the HSE. One part of this work is around the electronic point of entry, and Breedan O'Shea is the project lead for the electronic point of entry rollout of the National Incident Management System. It's quite a significant piece of work, and joining us today we have some experts from across the system who are using or introducing the system. Helen Flynn is a clinical nurse manager 3 in the urgent care centre in the Children's Health Ireland at Connolly and Blanchardstown. And Helen has, the system is in place for some time within Connolly. She's going to talk a little bit about the experience of introducing it and the difference that it's made to their practice. And then we have Martina Porter and John McElhenney, who are joining us from Letterkenny University Hospital. And Letterkenny are at a different stage of the process. Martina is the Quality and Patient Safety Manager, and John is the Quality and Patient Safety Manager for the CELTA group, and with 20 years experience working in related areas. We have these panelists have huge experience working across the health system collectively, but in particular around this system have some really useful insights. So we hope that you'll find it helpful. Just in terms of the session today, we're going to chat a little bit about electronic point of entry, and I'm going to pass over in a moment to Breedan and Lorraine, who are going to talk about some of the benefits, but also showing some screens. And just so that you can get a sense of what it looks like. We'll hear a little bit more about some of the features that are available. And then, as I said, the main purpose of today will be to hear from people using the system. And I know that people will have questions, so feel free to pop them into the chat box, as I said. And equally at the very end of it, what we'll do is we'll put up some contact details so that if you're interested in availing of this within your service, that you'll be able to do so and you'll know who to contact. It's probably the most important thing in terms of today is to who to contact. So I'm going to hand over now to Lorraine and Breedan. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Juanita. Breedan's going to share some slides for us. So a lot of colleagues where the names are popping up in the chat, I know will be very familiar with the National Incident Management System. So you'll all be quite familiar with the fact that it is a national reporting system where all organizations log their incidents. And today we're going to particularly focus on the electronic point of entry incident reporting system. So the key, I suppose, the overarching principle of the electronic point of entry system is that we want to make incident reporting easier for staff. So the functionality of the EPOE is that staff anywhere within an organization have access to the computer, can log on, click on a very simple icon, and Breedan will demo that in a minute, and they can immediately report that incident there and then. So you touched on it earlier, Juanita. We know that in a lot of organizations, people still use paper reporting, and in other organizations, they use alternative systems. And this really requires a lot of our staff then to transcribe those incidents from the paper record onto the NIMS system, which can be quite laborious, and also from alternative systems directly onto the NIMS system. So by having this functionality available within your organization, it cuts that out immediately, and it just makes life a lot easier for our staff. I think a key benefit for us within the health service is that this system is free to use, so there are no license costs associated with it, and I suppose a lot of credit to the State Claims Agency as well, who work with us in partnership and who host the system as well. So there's no associated costs for us. We have a dedicated support team within the HSE office, obviously within my team, and then also the technical support from the State Claims Agency as well. The benefit of the EPOE system is that it will provide you with real live data and real-time data. So a lot of managers who will be set up on the system who can see some of the dashboards that Breedan will show you in a few minutes, get that information very timely. We know that in some incidents, in particular where paper forms are used, that those can take quite some time to actually get us kind of meet. You know that KPIs, and by having the EPOE system, again, it makes it all a lot more timely, so compliance with KPIs are met. But more importantly, organizations can develop their own quality indicators for which the incident data is very beneficial. So it allows organizations to kind of set up their own systems and dashboards and see issues or hotspots or anything like that. So it's quite responsive. It's very user-friendly, intuitive, and a reliable system, and it's quite beneficial to have. We're very grateful for colleagues who are on the session today with us who have the experience of the EPOE system to share their kind of experience around it. And certainly the feedback we have received is anywhere we have rolled it out, it has been very well received. And then, as you can imagine, it's an electronic system. It's a smart form. It removes issues around eligibility. We know that in a lot of organizations, administrators actually log the incident on the NIM system. They might not know the nuances of the actual incident in that, so they're trying to interpret it. So the system really makes that a lot more specific. And Dan, who will show you a little demo of what it looks like.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Lorraine.
We're supposed to speak, to you about the implementation of direct electronic point of entry onto NIMS. And I'm going to show you kind of its functionality then in terms of incident reporting. So the first screen here, so here you have the desktop view, albeit quite a busy desktop, but the two icons, I suppose I just want to draw your attention to are the NIMS incident entry and the NIMS incident review icons. So you see the NIMS incident entry circle there in red. So that the incident entry icon is the one that all staff will click on and enter an incident kind of by navigating the screens, which I'll show you through the presentation. There's no need for username and password. Staff can just click on it and it'll bring them straight in. The second icon, the incident review, that's for staff members that are responsible for kind of reviewing and managing the incidents through the incident life cycle. So access to this icon for the incident review piece that requires like a NIMS dedicated account, and staff will be assigned an individual username and password. So today, as I said, I'm going to kind of show you how to navigate through the system for entering an incident record kind of directly using the electronic point of entry. So when an incident occurs, in a service, the staff member clicks on the incident entry icon and it'll brought then to the following screen. So like I said, you click on it. So this is the landing page that you'll be brought to, and you click on the button there, add new incident. So this is, an example then of an incident, and these are the screens that you'll see. And just to note, anything you kind of see there with a red asterisk, they're mandatory fields. Majority of the fields are mandatory, and we kind of think, this kind of eliminates the need kind of for staff to follow up when incidents are kind of entered with much of the main detail not completed, and kind of eliminates that, kind of back and forth between staff and line managers and QPS. So, and just to note as well, you see that these are fictitious incidents. So Tom Murphy is just an example, just we're using for today. So the very first item that you'd requested to enter is the categorization of the incident. So who does the incident relate to? Was it a person, property, cross collision, or dangerous occurrences? So the NIMS form is a smart form. So depending on the selection, depending on your selection, certain fields will appear or disappear. So in this example, you'll see there on the slide, the person is selected. So this moves down through the route with fields such as, category of person, details of person affected. So for example, if we were to select dangerous occurrences, the radio button there, then it wouldn't give you the fields, it wouldn't display, details of person affected. So it's quite intuitive that way, it navigates you down through the different routes. So then it asks you then to enter the date in the first field and time in the second. You'll see there the select location. So the healthcare location buttons, that will display all the sub-locations within your site. And from here you can select where exactly within the service that the incident occurred. So these will already be preloaded onto NIMS. You don't have to type that in. So once your location is on NIMS, they're all preloaded. All the locations and sub-locations are preloaded in behind that. So then you kind of continue on through the screens, completing the fields, you know, as per the details of the incident. So again, you know, just for this purposes, it's on 2, but when you log into NIMS to add a new incident, that's actually all on the one screen. So when you've populated then all the fields, you know, with all the incident details, you'll be brought then to the end, and you'll be asked to review the information that you've entered. So once you're happy that the details are correct, they'll ask you, have you verified the data entered, and you select yes, and then yes, that you've verified the data, and then you submit for approval. So when that step has been completed, an incident notice has now been raised. So an incident notice ID then is created following this submission, and this can be kept then locally, you know, if you require. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So the incident notice then, so that's submitted. Sorry, I jumped on there. So when the incident notice is raised, it goes into the review and approval area, or what we call kind of the holding area. So this is reviewed then by line management or the QPS department. And once they're happy that the data is accurate and that the system then will ask, you know, have you verified the data? And then once you select the radio button, yes, it's, you know, submit as incident. So you'll see there on the screen, it's on the bottom left-hand side. I know, apologies, kind of difficult to read. But you'll see, like, the incident, like I said, it's in that holding area. You have a red there, you see Tom Murphy, so that's the incident. And then once this is submitted as an incident, that is allocated then a NIMS reference number. So a NIMS reference number then is generated. So when a user then logs in, so, you know, I was saying that the icon then with the incident review. So when a user logs in with their username and password, so they'll be the managers or QPS staff. So they'll have access to reporting then, reporting and views and dashboards. So when they log in, they will see this screen, and you'll see there where the incident then has been logged, Tom Murphy as an extreme incident. So once submitted as an incident, then, you know, it'll be visible then on these dashboards. So, and again, just to note, all the incidents and raised here, they're all fictitious. So, okay, so here we have then the dashboards. So dashboards kind of display some of the real-time data at the click of a button, and these can be tailored for your specific location, your own specific area of interest. So just there, for example, we have kind of examples of time of occurrence by month and time and category of incident. So it just gives you a sense of, you know, when you put the information in, these can be preloaded and they can be accessed straight away. Again, it's just more of the dashboards. So here we have specialty, location, category of incident, and severity rating. So again, just some of the examples just of the reporting capabilities of this. You know, and like full training is provided, you know, on the incident entry modules. We have 2 modules on HSE land. There's also classroom environment, bespoke training for each site. The training kind of covers how to enter an incident, how to navigate the fields and the screens for all staff. There's also then training for approvers of the incident notices. So, you know, when I've said the incident is raised and it's in the holding area, there's also then, you know, special training then for staff that would be logging in with their username and password and approving those incident notices. There's also then dedicated training sessions then for users that would be generating reports, you know, so such as these dashboards and how they can kind of make those bespoke and how they can plug them in. And then training then, like, it's tailored to a particular site, and staff kind of as part of the rollout of the project. So as of yesterday, you know, we now have 4 sites using electronic point of entry. So we had CHI at Connolly was the first site, Port Uncla, then University Hospital, we have Sacred Heart Hospital in Castlebar, one of the community sites, and then most recently, you know, Letterkenny went live yesterday, which is great. So I know I robbed this line off one of the leads in CHI Conley, but I said, you know, they often said sometimes it was better to hear from someone who drove the car rather than the salesperson. So I'm going to hand you back now to Anita to introduce the EPOE sites. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much, Breedan. And there's a huge level of interest, I think, coming in the chat box at the moment. So we're going to come back to some of those questions, I think, at the very end, because there's some really practical questions coming through. We're going to just to chat a little bit with Helen and John and Martina. And in particular, we might just start with Helen and John. You're obviously at different stages of the process at the moment. So you might just tell us a little bit. We might start with you, Helen, just to tell us a little bit about where you're at and what you did before and what made you change.
Sure. So we opened Children's Health Ireland at Conley in July of 2019. So we're just about 3.5 years open now. When we opened initially, we were kind of putting together a QRSM structure, and we didn't have a quality department here on site. So as a senior management team, we kind of became that department with significant support from the other CHI sites. We filled out paper forms. We didn't have an online. I came from Temple Street by background, and we had an online system there, Respond, but we did paper instant forms here. We filled them out. We sent them for inputting to another site onto their system for records. But I suppose our main problems were feedback. There was no system of feedback on those forms, and also for any manager, I guess, who's ever been a manager, you come back from a few days off and your desk is sort of littered with instant forms. So the timely actioning of those and the visibility for staff was an issue. So with the team in state claims and Breedan and Lorraine, we set about becoming the pilot site for the EPOE.
Brilliant.
We had just that, we had concerns over tracking, trending, visibility, and feedback really were our main ones. And also we were a digital site, so we were really aiming to be as paper light as possible.
Okay, that's really helpful. And John, in terms of yourselves, what made you change from where you were at?
So where we were at in the Salta group was that we have been using a commercially available incident reporting system, which is point of occurrence as well, QPS. And whilst that works very well and is probably superior to paper in that it gets rid of some of the issues that Helen had mentioned, we had aggregated data available to us. But the problem is, as with any other system other than NIMS, it still has to be manually uploaded onto the NIMS. And that entails trained, licensed inputters. And when you reach a hospital maybe the size of Letterkenny here or more, I'm thinking of the tertiary centres, when you reach a critical mass of 8,000, 10,000 incidents a year, that chore becomes almost undoable unless you have an army of NIMS ratified data entry people. So we were seeing that really at any given time, although all the incidents were in QPS, maybe only 40 to 50% of our incidents in some cases were on NIMS. So we've long seen the value of having a point of entry on NIMS, and we've been pushing ourselves forward from the word go with Breedan and Mary and Lorraine to try and be that site, because we know electronic incident reporting works. We've overcome the challenges of paper and the transition from paper to electronic. But the big and the exciting thing about this particular system is that for the first time ever, we will have all of our incidents on one system. So Martina may speak in it shortly about pulling aggregated data reports and getting reports that are tailor-made for each department. That overcomes that legitimate criticism we've had for years of, well, we report all these incidents, but nobody tells us anything afterwards. And I think with NIMS point of occurrence, we will then be pulling all of our aggregated reports from an entire population of data rather than in currently with QPS, maybe 50 to 60% of our incidents. So there are obvious and immediate advantages for us in going from one electronic system to another. And in this case, over to NIMS, really, it's been successful at Port Uncle, as you mentioned. We actually saw a marginal increase in reporting down there, so there's certainly no negative impact. And so far here at Letterkenny, it's a bigger hospital, but we're hoping that the same thing will happen here and that we'll have a seamless transition from QPS to NIMS.
Brilliant. Okay. And so there's a huge amount in that, I think, in terms of the reasons around people's moving, but also sort of the benefits that you're starting to see and the potential benefits of this for services. Helen, you've obviously been doing it a little bit longer. Would you say that it's made things much easier for you?
Yeah, I think so. I think so as a manager, it has certainly made things easier. change is always a challenge. And I think because this particular group of staff went through such a enormous change in the opening of a building and bringing together teams and services and stuff, change was kind of quite something we were used to. So they did tend to just row in and get on board. From a manager perspective, my visibility of what's going on in the department on any given day, or particularly the weekend when I'm not here, it's the first thing I do when I come in on a Monday morning is go onto the dashboard and have a look at my intake app. So that certainly helps with that.
Okay, that's really useful. And John, in terms of the data in Letterkenny, and we'll come back, I think, to Martina in a second, but just how have you used sort of the data so far?
Well, what Martina will speak about is that to make data accessible, you have a lot of, there's a massive variation in classifications of incidents, and to be able to pull together dashboards and tailor-made or bespoke reports for particular areas is a huge advantage, and that's something we hadn't been able to do with our previous system. So it really is, as Helen said, it really does give the management of the department or the area much more ownership of what's going on in their area. Martina will speak about how it's done, but I think certainly the value of the information has multiplied by 2 or 3 fold, and it's much more relevant. And as I said again, it's all of our incidents, so we're getting a real profile of all of our incidents. So Martina can maybe mention to you how she's set up some of the bespoke systems already and how useful they've been.
Brilliant. Martina, we might pass over to you. I know you have a slide to share some information, but I know that you've been setting up reports, so you might talk to us a little bit about that. Thanks.
Yes, so I suppose one of the things that I do here is, I pull aggregated data to analyze and trend and identify hotspots within particular areas. I build reports for committees, so say like Drugs and Therapeutics Committee. I can pull all the medication related incidents very quickly and easily. And the beauty of the system is, the drop down menus allows you to really drill down into that incident, each incident, and look at it. Is it a prescribing error? Is it an administration error? So we really get that kind of that level of data where you can drill right down in and get quite specific data, which is really, really useful for different committees and forums that are making decisions based on this information and making quality improvements based on the information you're providing. For the service managers and line managers, they get reports every month. So I usually first week of the month, I have the reports generated for all the committees, but equally for all the line managers and areas, so they get their reports. They can go in and see the dashboards, they can get information at a glance, they can track and trend and see, the data for themselves. Some of the challenges that we faced around incident reporting was, a lot of free text writing. So while you would be able to collate information about falls, you mightn't be able to get the same level of information. Was this fall from equipment? Was this fall? What was the nature of the fall, the cause of the fall? So things like that, you might have got a lot of free text, but very little really usable information. So that kind of moves away from all of that. And I can generate a report on request quite bespokely if it's an area that's looking for a particular report and particular information. It can be laid out in the format that they want, and that can be set up in that person's view. So that can be pushed out into that line manager's view, so that it's there for them to click on and generate that report themselves moving forward if it's something they want to see regularly. So there really are huge benefits. When I ask the line managers, the benefits to them, as you can see on the slide, some of the quotes that I've received back, that allows quick and timely access to their reports and incidents. Because before, when you had to manually transfer data over, you mightn't have got that up-to-date information, if there was a delay in getting incidents over onto NIMS. So it allows us to be very timely with our reports. It's very, at this moment in time, snapshot of what's happening. We can see our information at a glance. And it allows really good information at a very drilled down level for good decision making and allow for quality improvements.
That's really good. It sounds really comprehensive in terms of the capacity to be able to give you that level of information, you know, at a glance. You know, it's a
Yeah.
really positive thing. I think one of the things that people might be most interested is in terms of if they're starting out of this piece of work at the moment and they're interested in it, about the implementation piece and learning from different sites and your experience of that. So I might go back to Helen for a moment and then I'll come back to Martina and John, just in terms of your implementation and the experience, what learning, you know, would you be willing to share with people around that, you know, that experience that they might be able to take on board if they're doing this?
Yeah, I think it was a overwhelmingly positive experience to start off with, especially to work with Bridan and the team. So I think that kind of multi-agency support, you just have to embrace that because the guys are so accessible and so helpful and so knowledgeable that nowhere can do it all themselves. So I think to tap into that as much as possible. We went big bang. So we did not do a blended paper versus EPOE option for people because I think similarly to like trying to get people to prescribe on the system and do prescriptions on the system, if there's a prescription pad there, they'll use it. So I think we felt like we wanted just to go all out. We picked a launch date and we worked towards that. And from that date, it was EPOE all the way. One of the most useful things for us was that like the HSE land training modules are useful, and we made them mandatory for everybody. So everybody had done those. But there is nothing like logging an incident to learn from it. So we used all of our paper instance that we had done from July 2019. We made a decision we wanted to get everything up on the system. So we used those instances for training. So we allowed the staff to use those to backload. So we got our backloading done, which was a benefit,
Yes, yeah.
but we used it as a training piece as well. And I know I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but I had received a number of phone calls during the week from people around the country about EPOE and implementation and stuff like that. So one of the pieces is the line manager approval piece. So I know that can be different in different sites. For us here, the line manager approval was the only way to go. We don't have a quality department here in Connolly. We don't have somebody doing like data input on incident management stuff for us. So line manager approval was our choice for that one, and it works really, really well.
Okay, that's really useful advice, and there's nothing to beat actually entering it and saying, how do I do this
No.
one, and the learning that comes, I think, from that is huge. And John and Martina, just in terms of yourselves and the experience that you've had so far, do you want to talk a little bit about that in terms of lessons that you might be willing to share with others from your experience around the implementation?
Yeah, of course, we've obviously gone live at Portiuncula University Hospital in Ballinasloe and also here at Letterkenny. Now, Portiuncula took the opportunity to have a really fundamental review of their incident management and governance, and that was done in tandem with the introduction of the EPOE. So it was a significant workload there for them and quite a lot of preparatory work. We've taken a slightly different approach here at Letterkenny, where we've looked solely at the project being to implement a change from a commercially available system, QPS, over to the EPOE, the EPOE, and that was much more straightforward insofar as that we looked at redesigning processes where they were needed. But Martina put in an enormous amount, and with her team, it has to be said, an enormous amount of preparatory work to make sure that locations, for example, that were existent on NIMS were accurate. We've all had COVID, and that's necessitated a lot of restructuring of different hospitals, and I'm sure similarly in CHO land. So we just wanted to make sure that there was a perfect alignment between what we thought was on the NIMS and what was actually on the ground. So that was a piece of work, but it was also timely for us. So, we got a double whammy there insofar as that we made sure that our systems were accurate, where an incident was occurring, that the location was correct. So that was a useful piece of work anyway. The other pieces that Martina would have done was, education and drop-in sessions, which Martina can speak about. But across the two sites, really, our benefits have been that there's benefits for the quality and patient safety people. And as Helen said, for the managers as well, we would lean more towards quality and patient safety, accepting and ratifying the incident. So when the incident's reported at the point of occurrence, the quality and patient safety personnel look at, validate the risk rating, and then accept it onto NIMS proper. The time consumed by doing that has been reduced significantly certainly at Portiuncula, and I would anticipate the same in a larger hospital like Letterkenny. So the dividend is there for everyone. And the key message I would have is certainly for people who are using paper currently, I can recall that being a significant challenge to get people away from paper. What Helen said, the big bang approach, most certainly that's what we've learned. You remove the pre-existing system and introduce the EPOE right away. If you have a dual reporting process, you are going to delay the uptake of the new system. So I think that would be one piece of advice I would give. Get rid of your existing system pretty quickly, if not immediately on go live day. And the preparatory work is all important. Martina, in relation to Letterkenny?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose one of the things I have to say is to concur with both Helen and John, like the support we've had from the national project team, and equally the support from John at CELTA level and the hospital management in implementing this. You know, everyone really got behind it and supported it, which is half the battle, really. You know, because everyone could see the benefits from the system and the information that was available to them. So there's been huge support for it, which made my job a lot easier in getting it over the line.
Okay, and it's interesting. There's just a question had come in around encountering challenges with Letterkenny and Portiuncula, where you had two systems, so the QPulse and then NIMS, the electronic for incident management. So I think that you've touched a little bit on that. But was there a concern where people had an existing electronic system and that sort of sense of we're already doing this, it's already on an electronic system? Was there a challenge around that conversation at the start?
Not from my part, unless you came across that on any of the other sites.
I think understandably there would be, because that question is asked, but I think Lorraine's already touched upon it. Anyone who's using a commercial system is incurring a financial cost on an annual basis. You know, and NIMS is the kind of sanctioned national system. So that's one given right away. The other thing is that for the people who are loading up these incidents and taking them from one system to another or from paper to the NIMS, there's a significant time involved in doing that. And as I said, that may seem like only a benefit for QPS people, but when you reach, as I said, a critical mass of incidents, it becomes damn nigh impossible to get them onto NIMS. So you are always prioritizing the more important or the more severe incidents, but that may leave you at year end with a backlog of incidents that may never get onto NIMS because of the sheer volume. So the benefits of that we would communicate. Martina's been doing drop-in sessions in Letterkenny. Tom and Chris and the crew in Portiuncula did the same. So I would say, you know, in the lead up to your go live, certainly 3 to 4 weeks before it, preparatory drop-in sessions, lunch and learns, things like that, short and sharp, never more than 15 to 20 minutes, to introduce the system and to give people a very clear idea what the benefits are for them. So, you know, for frontline staff, it may not be immediately apparent, but certainly the system is intuitive. It's easy to use, even for people who haven't used it before. So there are benefits from the frontline right up to us in QPS and to the state claims and national. So it's a really welcome advance, because we haven't had this before, and I keep stressing a unitary system has untold advantages for producing aggregated data as well.
Okay, I think that covers a lot. And I think just to say as well, I mean, that sense that in terms of whether you want the frontline managers or whether you want the QPS leads, that flexibility within the system to allow what works locally, I think is probably a really useful thing to have, because not every service is going to be different. Well, every service is going to have their differences. Just in terms of the advice, and John, you've just touched on it a little bit, touching on lunch and learns and those information briefing sessions. Have you other advice, and Helen, you know, yourself, you know, within CHI when you started out, other advice for sites just starting off with this, that you'd sort of say to them in terms of the essential things that to keep in mind if you're starting out?
I think an electronic system is exactly that. And I think this system is particularly smart and very responsive to the user. I think my advice would be, and I see questions coming in the chat around, you know, feedback to staff and those kind of bits and pieces. I think incident management systems are wonderful, but we need to remember that the incident form is a trigger for investigation. It's, you know, I think if we treat it like it is the answer to all of our problems, it becomes merely a measurement tool, which incident management was never supposed to be. So I think it is important. It is as equally important to have the follow-up systems in place as it is to do your EPOE and your incident management. So that's something we had to work on here and continue to work on here. As you know, okay, so the incident has been entered, the manager has reviewed it, and how do we feed back and what do we do? I would personally, as a manager, I consider those ones that I don't submit as equally important as those ones that I do. So I would always feed back on, because if I'm a staff nurse and I filled out a form, I'm presuming that's been submitted. So they need to know if it hasn't. But my advice would be this system is one piece, and it's as equally important to get your ducks in a row for what follows afterwards.
Yeah, and I do think from a staff perspective, you want to hear what's happened. If you've gone to the effort of reporting something, you need to know and to close the loop in your head in terms of this is what's gone on and this is where it's ended up. And John and Martina, anything from your side in terms of sort of that advice for staff just starting that you mightn't have touched on already?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of getting out there and educating staff, and having drop-in sessions, and even just getting the conversation going about it, because I suppose NIMS, when we were talking about NIMS initially, people thought it was a totally different system that we were talking about called NIMS, so
Yes,
so you had to really be clear what it was you were talking about, and what it meant for staff. What difference does this make to you as a clinician, and how this impacts on your workload? So what are the benefits you're going to get from this? So it's all those kind of things, because when there is a change, people want to know what's in this for me. I mean, that's what we all want to know. So what am I going to get from this? And I suppose we've been able to demonstrate by the reports that we're giving back to people. Like we launched yesterday, but I was going around the wards, just we were doing a bit of troubleshooting. And a lot of people were talking about, yeah, we see those reports coming in now, so that people knew there was no big surprises there. People were very au fait with it. So it's getting that information out there beforehand.
Okay.
We did newsletters and things like that as well.
Yeah.
Talking about NIMS and what is NIMS, and the difference, what difference this is going to make to people. So it's really communication is key.
Okay. Okay, that's really helpful. I'm gonna come back over to Bridan and Lorraine just to talk a little bit about how do you go about actually availing of this within your own service, and then we might take some of the questions. There's a lot of questions in the chat box, which is fantastic. And just to say to people, we obviously have a short time frame today, we won't get to answer them all. But Lorraine has put a note up in the chat to say that they will look at all of the questions and we will send them out to people in terms of the answers that you've got. Because I do think if you've got a question there, it would be brilliant to have an answer to that if we don't touch on it today. So Lorraine and Bridan.
Thank you. Yeah, so you can get in contact with us. So we do have a NIMS email address. So it's nims@hse.ie if you are interested. You see the names of our team that are listed there, and you can contact myself as well, Lorraine Schwamberg, if you are interested. We have quite a few resources that the team have developed over time, and they are available on our website. So you would make initial contact with us, and we would have a conversation with you online or over the phone, and then we do some kind of initial scoping with you in terms of what system you have available. And the team have developed that resource guide, which takes you through the 8 kind of key steps of what's required for the rollout. So I suppose just to mention as well, like with each rollout that we've done, like, we've learned, and the process has become a lot slicker over time, and the different sites have developed their own resources that they have shared with us. So every time we go to a new site, it makes it a little bit more streamlined and straightforward. So I think it's quite relatively slick now, but it is quite collaborative, as colleagues said. So between the local site, the management team, the state claims, and ourselves. So.
Okay, that's great to have that information and to know that people can email if they're looking for more. And I'm sure there'll be some interest after today. One of the big questions that's come up, obviously these are 2 hospital sites, is this available within community settings?
Yes, I think one of the first sites was a community setting in Castlebar.
Yes, so Sacred Heart in Castlebar. So that we were actually one of the first sites to go direct entry with EPOE. So yeah, it's certainly available to, any site and any service. So yeah, please get in touch. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was another comment just in terms of the importance of giving feedback on how to prevent incidents in the future. I don't know, just Helen and John, Martina, if you had any thoughts about using data on specific incidents to support training. Is that something that's happened or has been used by your teams?
Just from the
Maybe
point of
Helen.
view of, sorry, Helen, prior to the rollout of Letterkenny, Martina had already been developing dashboards specific for individual departmental managers. Now, that's not something that we had the capacity to do previously. So I think being able to extract incidents, near misses and dangerous occurrences related to a specific area and to feed it back meaningfully to a departmental head does address that challenge that we've always had about what happens after we report. So I think there's that, and Martina maybe can speak more about what you actually did in detail in relation to how you set those up.
Yeah, I mean, we have like directorate level meetings. So I do specific reports for each directorate, and I attend the directorate meetings. So we do have a good discussion about the incidents where the service manager is there. You have your lead consultant there. So you have a lot of people around the table there that's able to make decisions and decide when we need to implement a quality improvement plan for whatever it is, and equally for committees such as our falls committee, medication safety, different things like that, you can really, really get that flavour of the type of incidents that are coming in and make decisions about what we're going to do about it, and equally, simulation, use the simulation as learning as well for certain incidents that can be, you can take the scenario and do a simulation exercise as well. So there's loads of different ways that we use the information for feedback and learning.
Okay, that's really good. Helen, would you like to add anything to that?
I just think that, so I think there's nothing like a staff member being aware that a positive change in practice has taken place because they reported something or because you identified a trend in reporting. So I suppose we have begun to try and share that information. We have like a safety pause every morning. We have a quality board and we're implementing a risky huddle system for feedback to staff around instance that they have reported. But we're able to display now, we have changed this process as a result of, a trend identified in your instance reporting and changes that we put in place. And this is where the benefit has been. So that's really useful. And I think there's a gentleman or a lady that commented in the chat box about overcoming the rubbish in, rubbish out piece. How do you filter out somebody who reports an incident that's not really an incident or a near miss? And I think it goes the same for like quality in, quality out. I think if the quality going in is good, what you'll get out of it is really useful. And a lot of that here came from so one of my responsibilities in the beginning, and we had two great site leads in Paul Harding and Laura Gavin, who were here at the time and had fantastic support from our risk colleagues. But one of my jobs was data quality. So I was watching them as they were coming in and looking at that data quality and able to kind of even just tweak bits and pieces with people, things that should go in free text, things that shouldn't. So you have to kind of, that's a slower process. People will write an instant form for everything. So, and I think it very much depends on your culture that you have in your work environment. Historically, people would have filled out instant report forms to grab the attention of, the higher powers or whatever way it worked. Never happened. So, changing that culture to a culture of learning rather than waving flags, I think was something that was worked well on here.
Okay, the really useful insights, and the still questions coming through. So I think it'll be really helpful to go back through those again, Lorraine, afterwards. But one of the sort of the questions here, the most recent one is from Samantha. Who do we contact if we're interested? And we've put that up. But do we have to move as one? Do all of the services have to work together, or can one move on its own?
Well, ideally, we would like one site to go at a time, particularly in the hospital setting, in the community setting. I mean, one of the requirements is that staff do need to have access to a PC at the moment. We are in talks of potential other means of reporting down the future via an app or whatever, but that's very early days. So in the community setting, it might be one residential care facility or whatever.
Okay.
Map it out. That would
Okay,
be the
that's great.
preferred model, just in terms of capacity, wouldn't it be?
Yeah, yeah. And I think sometimes as well, you know, when you're doing a smaller site and without getting too much into the technical pieces, but you know, when you're reviewing locations, if you're rolling out in one department or one unit, then you have the you know, the complexities of, well, how do the other units and you know, as Helen had talked about the Big Bang, you're going to have some with paper and some, you know, EPOE, and it just gets very complex. So you know, the preferred model obviously is the full site, and it gets that whole communication piece and everyone kind of working together and moving forward with the project.
Okay. Okay, that's really good. We're just coming to close, you know, in terms of the end of the time. So I might just go back just to Breedan and Lorraine. Is there anything else from your perspective that you'd like to add in, or anything that we haven't touched on that you think would be helpful for people to know at this point?
So I think for me, colleagues have touched on for the local side, but I think for the national system, we know that in some sites, you know, there's certain incidents that make it onto the NIM system, but actually we're quite keen to roll this out because we know it will make incident reporting easier for staff. And at a national level, we're quite keen on that national data because obviously we feel we have a responsibility to share learning. So you'll be familiar with our Patient Safety Together platform that we'll be rolling out very soon. So we can kind of see the national data. So if an incident trend is happening in one hospital, is it happening elsewhere? And communicating that national learning. So it's a key driver for us, I suppose, to get the system up and running as well and get staff engaged with it.
Okay. Breedan, anything from your perspective?
Yeah, I suppose just I suppose a final point. I know the other sites raised it. You know, the support that you know they had gotten from the NIMS team, but I think it was absolutely while working through the project, it was completely reciprocated. The you know the buy-in and you know behind this, and really you know there was very you know the clinical like directors got behind it. You have you know QPS leads, the staff on the ground were really you know buying into this. You know, getting the staff together, doing local sessions on the ground, the communication. And I know like Martina and Helen both kind of, you know, said this, it's the communication on the ground to let staff know that this happens. And like, you know, coming up to go live date, we have weekly meetings and, you know, then there's, you know, something goes wrong and there's, you know, a phone call here and there. And every time, you know, staff were coming back and really trying to sell this, you know, as a positive. So like it was great to work on these projects. And I think even, you know, with Helen, like Martine and John being here today, they've been very generous with their time, you know, and even when we rolled out with Port Uncla, you know, we had Connolly on the call. So it's great to have that shared learning and I know it will continue. So just
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things that strikes me is, you know, the time the system seems to save people. And I think my sense on it from listening and from talking to you is the amount of time that we spent on paper-based systems or duplicating work, you know, do it right rather than doing one system and then putting it onto another. You know, in a time when we're already under pressure, it's brilliant to have something that takes a little bit of pressure off and that supports staff with easy access to data when they need it. So just to say thank you so much to all of our panelists today. It's been really a huge amount of information, I think, covered in a short space of time, and we really appreciate your insights. I'm conscious that there's a lot of questions in the chat box we didn't get to touch on, but we will follow up with the document on that. And I might ask Stephen just to pop up the final slides, but just again to say thank you so much to our panelists. You've been fantastic. So thanks again. Just in terms, just very quickly, and I'm going to pass back to Lorraine just to talk about Open Disclosure Week. It's a very important piece of work that's happening at the moment. So Lorraine.
Yeah, and thanks again for the opportunity for flagging this. So it is Open Disclosure Themed Week. I know there is a lot of activity on in the system. A big thanks to the Open Disclosure team, of course, who have been promoting and leading out on a lot of the communication around this, but a huge thanks as well to the Open Disclosure leads in the various services and for colleagues getting behind this. I suppose we all are very engaged in incident reporting. But the key message is obviously that it is the right thing to do, that when an incident occurs, that we are open and transparent with the persons that are affected or the relevant persons. So thanks for all the work that's gone on already, and do tweet whatever social media platform you might engage with. We really value your support. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you for that. Um, and the walk and talk improvement for anybody that's interested in resources to support your work around improvement or to tap into that broader community of improvers. There's some really good resources with this podcast, Walk and Talk Improvement. You'll see the QR code there, and also you'll find links on our website and via Twitter. It's co-produced with some of our patient partners and the HSC QI. So some really good speakers and really interesting topics there. Thanks for that, Stephen. Okay, and then just to say QPS education, there's obviously resources available for people that are interested in continuing your education around quality improvement. I'm sure looking at the list of people that are on, some people here could give these courses, but others might be new to this or might like a refresher. There is a prospectus of education and learning, and the link is there. We will circulate out the slides afterwards, so you'll be able to have that link. But again, it's all available on the website. If you go to the National Quality and Patient Safety Directorate, you'll find a section on QPS Educate, and there's some information there focusing in particular at the moment on systems analysis review, serious incident management, and the National Incident Management System, so that there's some training programs there. But there's obviously a much broader range of courses available, including resources around open disclosure, which is the focus at the moment, because ultimately with all of this work and even the electronic system that we're talking about today, it is the service user. It's ultimately to try and improve the system for them. So if we have a sense of trends or issues that are coming up within the system, we get to improve it for people that are using it, and we have the evidence to support those improvements. So that's really helpful. Okay, Stephen. The QPS Ireland network map, again, for anybody interested in joining that broader community of improvers, there is a network map online. It's really useful to go in and to see who might be close to you location-wise, who's interested in this. Often we're working so furiously in our own areas, we don't get to connect with that broader community. And what you might find is there could be somebody in the CHO next to you or the hospital or in another office down the hall that's actually interested in this, and you mightn't have met them or might know about it. So it's a good way to link in with those in your area or broader that have an interest in quality improvement. So that information is available online again under the website and the QPS Ireland network map. And the last is the Q community. So again, this is a network of people that are interested in quality improvement. It's free to join, and the information is available on the website. You can also contact Caroline Lenanali and email her if you've got queries. But just to say that the website will have that information. There's a short application process that's there to join. But again, you're accessing that broader range of resources, people with an interest in this area, and it can really help you if you're trying to keep motivated in some of this work. And that can be quite challenging at times to tap into others that are doing this work and to learn from their experience and get some information from them, and to access training programs that may be available, and in some instances funding that can be available to support some of your work. Okay. Our webinar is upcoming. So the next webinar is on Tuesday, the 22nd of November, and that's the QPS TalkTime Stories from Postgraduate Certificate in Quality Improvement. So again, this is one where we're bringing stories from staff that have implemented changes within their service areas in quality improvement, and talking to them about that work and the lessons that they've learned, and also some ideas that you might be able to take within your own service area. And then on the 13th of December, there's a slight change. It's 3 weeks time, and that's because there is a conference in the interim, and we don't want to, we know some of the audience will be going to that, so we didn't want to lose that opportunity, and that 13th of December is the QI strategy from the HSC QI, and Livette Lamb, our colleague there, will be joining us on that day to tell us a little bit about that strategy. Okay. So just there will be that short survey that's going to pop up in a few minutes. We'd really appreciate it if you could take the time, and just to say thank you so much again for taking your lunchtime to participate in this webinar. It's great to see so many participating and the level of interest in this piece of work. The details again will be circulated as to how you can access more information on the electronic point of entry, and also if anyone is interested in joining the mailing list for the QPS Talk Time, any colleagues that you have, they can email Stephen. But thank you again for your time today.